to Way Back When with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy.
Welcome to Big Blend Radio's third Friday Family History Show with Nancy and Lisa, the Big Blend mother-daughter travel team and publishers of Big Blend magazines. And we've got Miss holly-t-hansen, Gen teacher and president of Family History-expos, back on Big Blend Radio today. And you know what? Family History-expos, they're celebrating 15 years this year and having a huge expo. It's a virtual online event. It's called Pirates of the Pedigree 2018 International Family History Expo. It's held October 15th through 20th, 2018 this year. So you may want to check that out if you go to our website, family-history-expos.com. And of course, they're on social media everywhere. But, you know, we're very excited because Miss Holly, as we call her, she's a teacher here, the Gen teacher. Mm-hmm. She is joining us every third Friday for our family, now brand new family history show. So this is so exciting to have a monthly series, and not only on Big Blend Radio, but she's also going to be part of our editorial contributors in Parks and Travel magazine and in Big Blend Radio and TV magazine, because we definitely cover history and family history, travel, and all kinds of good stuff in those magazines. You can see her expert pages up on blendradioandtv.com, as well as nationalparktraveling.com. But Miss Holly, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm happy today. It's a beautiful day.
Yeah, and you're out in Utah, and so your area is a pretty. Describe your region where you live and you're based.
Okay, I live 70 miles northeast of Salt Lake City, up in the mountains. So we have a few quaking aspen trees in our backyard, and out of my backyard, a mountain juts several thousand feet straight up in the air. It's beautiful. There's a lot of red rock and sagebrush around, so it is a high desert valley. It could be 100 degrees right now, and tonight it'll be 62.
Wow. Well, maybe we'll move out your way, because it's definitely over 100 degrees here, and it's going to stay that way until midnight. It's how it feels over here in Tucson, Arizona. Right. But I love it that you're connected with us through just, the Southwest. You're up there, and then Utah. Yeah. It's a beautiful state. Beautiful state.
Well, we touch Arizona, so we're one of the four corner states, and
yes,
we love it.
So we are connected. We are, and this is part of the whole family history part of it. And today's show, we're getting to know you as one of our new experts, and we love it. We have our special 10 questions that we send out to our experts, and people have been doing something for a while and really passionate about it, and have gone through the ins and outs of their career. And this is the first time we've ever done a genealogist insider, the 10 questions, and everyone. Holly's feature will be in the September-October issue of Big Blend Radio and TV magazine, but you can read her answers to the questions, the 10 questions, if you go to blendradioandtv.com. Just type in Miss Holly, and you'll find her. But Miss Holly, I'm going to put my hand up every time I ask you a question here, but, living near Salt Lake City, that's got to help because of that huge library, the Family History Research Library out there. So do you do a lot of trips to the library? Do libraries help when it comes to genealogy?
Absolutely. I really do. When I first started seriously doing research, I would go to Ogden. There was a family history center there, which is 35 miles for me. And everything I wanted to look at was microfilmed, and it would be in Salt Lake. And I'd say, if I ordered the film in, it would be several days before I could look at it. And so I very quick, because I'm passionate about, when I take something on, I just get excited and I want to find my answers right now. And so I started driving to Salt Lake because I couldn't wait. Well, it cost me more to order a film in than the gas to get to the library. So I'd just drive straight to Salt Lake, and then I could look at 100 films in a day rather than only could afford to bring in 4 or 5 at a time. And it's so fun, and now you could do it online because so much of their collection has been digitized. I don't even have to drive to Salt Lake. I make a list. There's some things they have that are protected by copyright that the copyright holder says, we'll let people look at it in your library, but you can't make it available online. Mm-hmm. And so I just make my list. And when I get enough things on my list, I drive down there. But we also have events where we bring people in from anywhere in the world and hold their hand, help them with their very own personal research. Because when I very first started doing research at that library, I remember the first time I walked through the doors, it was big and there were all these books and all this microfilm. I didn't even know what microfilm was, really.
It's a fish.
And
there's a fish.
Yeah, there's microfiche and microfilm, and they're different, and you use different machines to look at them. So, and I'm a kind of person that likes to know everything I can. And before I ask questions, I want to I want to kind of snoop around. And so when I ask a question, I sound a little more intelligent. I don't know if you're like that. I have one of my sons, he must have inherited this. When he was a little kid and he's learning to talk, I'd say bread, and he'd just look at me and smile. And then I'd hear him, he'd go in the living room and go behind the recliner and he'd practice. Then when he could say it, he'd come out and look at me and he'd say, bread. and so I think he learned that from me because I want to go practice before I let anybody hear me. I know. It's funny, don't you think?
I love this because you're into it and you want to, I think when you prepare, it's like as travel writers, we always try to research an area before we go so that we know exactly what we need to go and see. And of course, leave a huge, piece of your trip to flexibility because it's not always out there in the books and everything or online. And when you go there, you'll meet somebody and you'll get a different story. But you should at least know a little bit about the history that the town you go to, that kind of thing. So you're not wasting your time there. When you're there, you're absorbed in it. Do you feel like you are Nancy Drew, like, solving mysteries?
I do. I read all those Nancy Drew mysteries when I was a kid. I just loved it. And so I love to know what's going on and then find out more. So that first trip to the Family History Library, I probably arrived there about 10 o'clock in the morning. And I'm looking at things and just, reading these little how-to guides, different things they had. And I started, locating film and books and figuring out how they worked. And the next thing I knew, the library, this thing came over the library that said, it's 9:45 and the library closes in 15 minutes. And I had a stroke because I'd left my husband home. He was injured. He had his leg up, and I'd left him with all 5 kids. And it's an hour, if I'm feeding, it's an hour to get home. And I'm like, I am dead meat. He'll never let me come again. And I was sweat all the way home. And when I walked through the door, he just said, did you have a good time? Oh. And it just made my life because he has supported me and loved seeing my joy as I do family history research. He has loved it. And so, I was so shocked. I expect, if I had been bowling with the girls and came home, was gone for 12 hours, I'd have been dead. But he didn't care. It didn't bother him that I was at the library.
Well, that's supportive. I know you, cool. Going on your website, family-history-expos.com, going there and reading about you and your husband. I think it's amazing. You've 40 years of marriage, and so there's that support. And I think, when you're looking at history and family history, you're going to find all kinds of stories, all kinds of connections. And there's always going to be a scandal somewhere. This is good gossip. That's what Nancy and I always say, history, right? It's gossip. It is gossip, but then you'll find things to be truly proud of. I think there's something about, when you watch all the TV show with, there's that Tracing Your Roots. Am I getting the wrong name here? I know it's on PBS, I think, the family history where you watch people start to connect with their family around the world in those, stories. Some of them take them all the way back to Germany, and there's some, rough history to take on that. But there's also, I think, it's important for people to understand their family history, especially the younger generations, because when you look in the past, there seems to be a stronger backbone sometimes. There's like a different set of ethics almost, a very, get it done. You're going to, if you have to work from 6 in the morning till, 10 at night, you'll do it, And so I know we definitely have that around in the world and in this country with people, but I think there was something different about our makeup back then, about how we would just handle things and deal with them, and really, really get our hands dirty.
Right. There's some stories that I've come across as I've been doing research. Now, my grandmother was born in Augusta, Georgia, 1895, and I've been researching her ancestors and my ancestors that come from that area. And during the American Revolution, there was, it was awful. And I know that it was like this every place, but Georgia is where my family was at that time. And there's a story of a woman who got a log and went in the river and floated close to the enemy camp where she could hear their plans. And then she went back and she went and found the military leaders and told them. Wow. Because they had, that the enemy had showed up in a place that no one was expecting them, but she lived near there. Would you do that? In a long dress and
no,
maybe
and
there
they
were
have alligators.
snakes and
yeah, they have snakes and gators.
Yes.
I know. I see my Instagram.
And she went in that
those.
river, hanging onto a log, and floated close to the bank, and then worked her way back and went and found the military officers and warned them, and they were able to avoid a defeat. And at that point in time, we had Great Britain and their armies and the Loyalists fighting against the American patriots and their little band of men that Georgia was the last stronghold for Great Britain in this country, and that was just a just merciless battle down there because they were, Great Britain was trying to hang on because there was a lot of money in this country. And to lose it was a great loss for their economy. It was a big deal. And so to read some of these stories and see what these men and women and children did for our country, I just think, I don't know if I would have done it. I've asked, I've spoke to groups of women and said, would you do that? Would you get on, hang on to a log and float yourself across the river when you saw the enemy over there? Being a woman. And if they caught you, what they'd do, it would be awful. And we had these heroines. They're amazing women. And so I just love it. I'd rather do research in the records than read historical fiction because the truth is even more interesting.
Well, this is interesting because I know that you also got honors a BA in history. You went to Weber State University, and I know that you've written books, The Directory of North American Railroads, Trekking for Ancestors. I'm fascinated with that. And also co-authored a series of 16 family history interview books entitled Celebrating and Capturing the Memories. You've written 26 in-depth research guides. You're former editor of Everton's Genealogical Helper magazine, the editor of the 10th and 11th editions of the Handybook for Genealogists, over 1 million copies sold. And then you've written over 100 syllabus and class handout books for family history expos that you've put on over 50 family history expos across the country. So I mean, that's a long bio, man. That's a lot to read about you, Holly.
I guess that makes you an expert.
I know. That's why we get to call her Miss Holly, the Gen teacher. But learning all this history to me is really fascinating because don't you get the understanding of the makeup not only of our country, but you start to understand the history of the world that way.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It just gets in your blood, it gets in your blood. And today I had an email this morning when I checked my email that was from the Journal of American History. I'd subscribed to it. There was a guy that writes really good stuff for Georgia, Robert Scott Davis. He's amazing, brilliant man, and has gone into the records and made available to us a lot of things for a place that has had a lot of burned counties and destroyed records. But he'd written an article that was in this journal, so I subscribed to it. And today I get one, and there's this gorgeous picture of two horses, just fascinating. So I followed the link on the picture to the artist, and it's all this colonial artwork that at first I thought they were photographs mean, I'm like, that is such good. It almost looked like a photograph, but they were beautiful. And so then you read the history of all of the art of the Revolution and the colonial time period, and I don't know. It just leads me from one thing to another, and I'm just fascinated by it.
That is
a great picture you might want to use on the cover of one of your magazines sometime.
We're going to have to put you on a show, definitely with Glenn Burrows over in Norfolk Tours, over in England, who's been on our shows for 10 years? I don't know, 8 years? I can't keep track, but he's been with us for a long time, educating audiences on England, and a lot of people go there and trace their family roots, and he takes them around. I know he's one of your exhibitors in the booths at the family-history-expos.com. This is really a virtual online, event where you get to go and see all the booths and then go to the lectures and the classes. It's so cool. But also, between him and then Victoria Chick, she covers art history, and she gets into it and starts in. I mean, this is what blows my mind about what you do, Ms. Holly, is talking about historical fiction. Nancy has a story to tell you about her writing a novel about the history of Kenya. But Victoria and Glenn, we have to do a show between the three of you, because she really traces, she got into all the lineage of how family portraits were painted, and at one point women weren't in it, and then yes, the whole family could be in it, and is it only the lords and the dukes and the lords that get to be painted? And she does that, and you start getting into the lineage of all these different artists, and how Impressionism moved from France to here, and it's really fascinating. Even how art was part of documenting wars, Civil War, and things like that. So it's very interesting how that comes around. But Nancy, tell Miss Holly about how you wrote, how well you wrote your novel. That's never been finished.
That's never been written.
Yes.
No, I was going to write a historic novel of Kenya, and I got so wrapped up in the research that I ended up going to a newspaper and getting a big roll of newspaper, print white paper, and covering the walls of our house with it, and making a chart of the world.
This is pre-Google, everybody.
Yeah,
way
before the
that.
internet. Gosh, I'm old. No, and, I just didn't want to make a mistake and have the wrong kind of rifle or something. And I realized I didn't know near enough to write a historic novel, so I started looking at the kind of clothing they would have worn, the British colonial era, what they would have been eating, what would they look like at that time. And so I had started making all these notes and about rifles, clothing, what kind of animals, like dogs, what kind of dogs. Because you can't just say that everybody had poodles, at a certain time. And I got so involved in the research, we called it the Chart of the World, and I never wrote the book.
No, but I'd come home from school and we would add things to the Chart of the World. And that's how I got in, my true interest in history was from that project. And then because, Nancy took me everywhere, traveling, we'd go to museums and historic sites where you're just wow, these people walked here. It's incredible,
It's incredible. That reminds me of another story in my family. When my children were growing up, I was working on my genealogy, and I had a chart on the back of the kitchen door, and it was a big chart, and I would write in, it's a pedigree, so there's my name and then my parents and then their parents, and as I would do the research and prove and my goal was to get a copy of their birth and their marriage information and whatever I could find on them for each generation, and not just have someone tell me, but I want proof. I want to see how they connected together, and that was important to me. So I would fill it out in pencil, and then when I got the documents that I could prove it, then I'd go over it with ink. So I had, whatever people told me, I wrote in pencil, and then as I did the research, if I needed to change something, I could erase it. But my kids would come home from school and say, "Oh, I hate social studies," and I'd say, "Oh, are you kidding? I mean, that's the most exciting part of school. What are you guys talking about?" And they'd tell me, and I'd bring them over to the chart, and I'd say, "Okay, look, here's you, and here's mommy, here's grandma," and I'd go back to that generation that lived in that time that something was going on, and I'd tell them a story about that ancestor, and it became personal for them. Mm-hmm. And this chart was like, no one touched it, right, except for Mommy. But we had this chart, and one day I came home. I'd been over to my parents' home or something. I came home, and there's big red lip prints on my chart. Mm-mm. You know, my back of my hair that stands up on the back of my neck, and I'm like, somebody's dead meat, you know. But I had this feeling to be calm, and so I took a deep breath, and I said, who kissed Mommy's chart? You know, to find the culprit, because I didn't want him to run and hide from me, right? And my little daughter, she was probably 6 years old at the time. She ran on and she goes, I did it, Mommy. And I said, why would you do that? And she goes, I love that, Grandmama.
Oh.
And it just stole my breath away.
That's become
and now all my kids, they want that chart. I mean, it's part of their life. So what did you do with the timeline of the world that was on your walls?
Yeah, when you leave countries, you end up losing things. Yeah, that's all I can say.
That was one of the things that was.
We went on the tour after that.
Yeah,
we went on the tour. We were on the road for about 2.5 years, and Nancy, because Nancy's a wildlife artist, and she can paint anything she wants to, and so we took her art on the road for 2.5 years, raising funds for the National Cancer Association. And we went everywhere, and she was also doing an exhibit for the tourism boards and the parks. And of course, you know, here we are back with parks again, Nancy and I have national parks.
Yep.
And
that's awesome.
So at that point, everything just got put into storage, and it was, you know, and then, you know, she started a magazine after that, and then we had to leave because it was time to keep our passports and come back to America. So we really didn't bring much. We couldn't. We are very lucky to have.
Did you take pictures before you left? Did you take pictures of your chart?
Nancy, of the chart? Oh, I wonder if you did.
I doubt it.
Oh, I wonder. We have over 18,000 slides from her wildlife photography and her photography around the world, and maybe we weren't. This is the thing. We weren't very good at handling our. You know, we were all about what are we looking at? You know, other people's, you know, stories, and we've learned now. One of the things we wish we had done was taken more photos of each other, and you know, and things like that on the travels, because and to this day we're terrible about it. Terrible.
Yeah, and that's the truth of all of us. That's the truth of all of us.
Yeah.
We do that. It's true.
And I think when you start to, you know, look at your lineage, and I think about, you know, when I started doing that with our family, we did actually get a little far. We actually started connecting with relatives we didn't even know existed. And they were sending us, you know, historic photos of where, like, my great-great-great-grandmother is from. And, you know, it's really fascinating when you start digging in there. But it's true. You know, now I think, isn't it easier now people have blogs and journals, and now with the digital world, for people to get started into genealogy?
I think it is really a lot easier. It can also be more overwhelming because there is a virtual sea of information, and where do you really start? You know, it can be overwhelming, but it certainly is much easier. You have tools available at your fingertips just right now. It's really cool.
Well, that's what I think is so cool about your website. You know, you go on family-history-expos.com. You have books on, like, if you're in the British Isles, if you're exploring that, and if you're in the military, and it's just a few of the, you know, some of the books that I've seen on there. I'm like, wow, I didn't even think to go that way. And then you have all these charts and free downloads on there. I was looking at them, and I've never tried to do a family tree. I just keep writing, oh, so-and-so is here. I've never thought about how to do that. And then I was looking at some of the charts, and honestly, they look like we're making lace. It's like a lace pattern. You know, I'm like, okay, what are we doing? Bees? It's like these little boxes, and it's actually pretty. So what is the very first step for someone? I know you do retreats, and I want to talk to you about that one. I want people to know what you do. But if someone calls you, Holly, do you help people individually and help them get started?
I do. The first thing I want to know is timeline. You know, who are you researching? I want to see what it is that you're working on so that I want to help you get what you want. I could say, okay, this is what you should do. Right now, get a pedigree chart out, put your name here and then put your parents there and list these people. That maybe you really just want to know about your ancestor who fought in the Civil War. And you really don't care about all this pre-stuff. We all have a different thing that we really want to know about. And so my first thing is tell me what you're working on and give me a timeline of what you know about that person. And then I can look at it and get an idea of how to help them. So that's what I do. Now, if you just want to do your genealogy and trace your tree so you know every generation, you use a pedigree chart. You start with yourself. And if you're married, you have information on your spouse. You can have a family group sheet that's associated with that lists if you have children. And then you go to the next generation, it'd be your mom and dad, and you have them on that pedigree chart. And then an associated family group record that has your mom and dad and all your siblings, and you list them in birth order. And I'll help people with that. You can do it on paper. There are programs out there that you can buy to load onto your computer and keep it private. There are websites out there like Family Search and MyHeritage and Ancestry that have web-based programs that help you build your family and will help you learn. It depends on, some people want to do everything on their cell phone. Some people want to do it on paper. I have to know what your desire is, what the tools, the tools you have access to will make a big difference on where we get going, where we start.
This is so fascinating, and also communication with your family as much as you can to get as much information. And then you've got the world of DNA. So was that around when you got started in genealogy? Because I know the first time you were on the show, you were talking about your grandma getting you started at a very, very young age. Do you think your grandma would ever think that genealogy would play DNA would play a role in genealogy? You just take a little test.
I'm not sure if my grandmother even knew what DNA was.
Okay.
I don't know that. She died in 1971.
Okay.
Would she have known what DNA was? I remember when DNA came into the marketplace for the genealogy world. You'd heard about DNA evidence in the crime lab, right? But when it showed forth the very beginnings in the genealogy world, I remember a highly respected speaker got up at a conference and said they'll use it to put you in jail and put you behind bars. And, if you give somebody your DNA, then they'll be able to. And it just was a doom and gloom picture. And it's changed. No one thinks that way today. It's like, wow, I've helped people adoptees find their birth parents. And it's been a really awesome thing. Mostly it's brought around really good things. I'm sure just like when I find a record of an ancestor who went to prison for some deed, you maybe didn't really want to know that. And the same with DNA, you might it might connect you to someone you didn't really want to be connected to, but the truth's the truth. And the farther away it is from you, if it's a disaster, it's easier to deal with. If you have an ancestor that was a horse thief in the 1830s, you can laugh about that.
That's cool.
But if it's your dad, if it's your dad today, it's not quite so funny, It's a little more difficult to deal with. So
I think DNA has played a part in having people who were sent to prison cleared eventually.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That was one of the biggest things that immediately people that had DNA evidence, and they checked that when that was available, one of the biggest releases from our prison system that we've ever seen in this country.
It's incredible.
Because
it really is. It's an incredible tool, and I know that they're using it for plants. They're using it for animals. They're using it. There's that. We were actually talking about you on a recent interview we were recording about Appaloosa horses, and the Chief Joseph Trail Ride. It's done through the Appaloosa Horse Club, and you have to be on an Appaloosa because that's the horses that Chief Joseph and the Nez Perce were riding and breeding, and
Mm-hmm.
that was their horse. And so now every year they complete a portion of this trail. All these riders, it's a progressive trail that takes 13 years to complete. And our friend Christy Wood, she's on the second. She's on the second leg of this. Second turn. I mean, she's been doing this for a number of years, and I'll tell everybody you can watch out for it on BigBendRadio.com. But it's such a fascinating story about the DNA and how that has led to knowing who's breeding the horses incorrectly, and is it a pure breed? We're going to the pedigree again.
Yes.
And I was just like, you've got to be on a show with Holly. Miss Holly's got to be there to talk about horses, and because they're talking about how they, through DNA, were able to trace. They're doing the family history of horses to make sure
exactly.
That's
where the pedigree started.
Yeah,
that's where it started. Horse breeding. You bet.
Wow.
There's a lot of money in it. A big. Sometimes when you're talking to people and you say pedigree, they say, are you talking about dogs?
That's what I thought.
It's foreign. It's foreign to a lot of people that associate pedigree with a human being, because it's so prevalent in the animal world. But you don't hear about it so much. Maybe more now today. There's more out there with these shows like Henry Louis Gates does, and Who Do You Think You Are, and the PBS series, and the relative race. I mean, there are a lot of shows out there now that we watch for fun, that are entertaining, that we're more aware of the tools that people use to display the findings of their family history.
I think that's what's really great about what you're doing with the online expo. And I know you've done a lot of expos, across the country. And that's great that people can be there, but it's so accessible what you're doing that people around the world can connect. And the fact that you're going and doing, I know we had Mr. Paul Ajay on the show with you before, and him talking, and he's one of the presenters at the expo. And everyone, again, this is October 15th through 20th. And he's talking about, documenting, family history, from Ghana, Sierra Leone, Liberia, just Nigeria. It's really fascinating. And I just look at this, I go, wow, the whole world can unite through this. But I also know so this is awesome what you're doing, teaching people online, working with them also one-on-one, which is something everyone can do. I just want to know, are you up at 3 a.m? Do you have like Coco and you're looking at the computer screen like, I found him. I can just see you doing that. Like,
sometimes I do. That's exactly right.
I know, that's what suddenly I can see like there's got to be like a lot of Facebook groups on this too. But I do want to touch on the retreats because also this is going to be such a cool series. I mean, I'm so excited because it just touches on so many pieces of history and places and people's stories, and my mind just goes crazy whenever I think about, okay, what are we going to cover next? But we were talking with our friend Stephanie McMillan over in Springfield, Kentucky. And we'll be there this fall, late fall, and a couple of hotbeds of history is Louisiana, where we are going as well, Natchitoches and Springfield. And they've got these Holy Land tours. And I know we're going to try and do something with you and Glenn also because of Abraham Lincoln's family histories and his community. It's crazy, all these connections. But I can tell
you an Abraham Lincoln story too. I'll save that for when you want to talk about.
Oh, cool. They've got a story there too because there's naughtiness. They had to prove. Okay, we've got the goods on Abraham Lincoln. Let's put it. And we're going to go to his birthplace memorial too, in his childhood home when we're up there. But I wanted to touch on this because she was talking about retreats, and so tell us about that because you said you would actually go somewhere like some of the nonprofits or churches may come in and get grants, and then you can go. I look at this as even Yuma, Arizona, where we're going again. We're going back there in a couple of days. And
we do retreats. We do 2 a year in Salt Lake City at the Family History Library, where people come in. We teach a class each morning, and we spend 8 hours a day helping people with their personal research. And the reason that's a great place is because there are records from all over the world that are available there, and it's fabulous. And you can get away from home, all your other roles, mommy, sister, daughter, worker, whatever things that you do. You just get to be a genealogist for a whole week. And it's so fun because you really increase your education. But we do retreats. We call them a local retreat, where we'll come to, let's say, Colby, Kansas, and we set up to go visit the county courthouse, Thomas County Courthouse. We'll go to a couple of different cemeteries, like the city municipal cemetery, and then we'll go out into the hinterland to Jim Cemetery, where you have to watch out for snakes. I mean, I have a picture of this snake that once got me when I was at Jim Cemetery, and it was scary. And so we teach you how to actually go search a cemetery so you're safe. And we'll go to churches and show you the kinds of records that they have compiled. So in a two-day retreat, we'll visit maybe even the jeweler shop to see what kind of records. People, when they get married, they buy rings, and when it's Mother's Day, they buy different kinds of jewelries, and what kind of records do they have that might be helpful with. And you wouldn't think, sometimes you just don't think about those kinds of records, like the furniture shops. Historically, they had maps for their drivers who drove the wagon, the horse-drawn wagon with furniture. They had to deliver it, and they had maps, and it had all the people's names and everywhere they lived and where the swamps were and wherever. It's fascinating, and you might not even think about those kinds of things, but we take you hands-on and walk through the courthouse and walk through several different churches, whatever is available in that community. We'll go to museums and teach you how to ask the kinds of questions that get results.
Wow, this is so cool. Okay, so we need to do a show on graveyards and cemeteries and reading the tombs, and we need to do that. We've got to.
Okay.
I love going to graveyards because there's just some of the sayings on the tombs they're fascinating, and it's fascinating. And you find out history about, was there prejudice in the town back then? Were people aligned, united, not? You know what I mean? There's all kinds of, like, were they a criminal in South Africa? Remember, they buried them in a different angle from everybody else.
They bury everybody with their heads facing, I believe it's east. And if you're a criminal, your head faces west.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, that's kind of a Christian thing, to bury you with you facing the east.
Yeah.
It's very odd.
And then there's churches where you're buried underneath the church.
Inside the church.
Yeah. That's
right.
So. Oh my gosh.
The richer people were buried near the altar, and the poorer people are way back.
But I do have.
Or out in the churchyard. Yeah.
I have. Okay, what's up with the snakes? Because I have footage when we were in Wilcox, Arizona, in southeast Arizona, just down the road from us here in Tucson. They have this historic cemetery, and you had to really kind of go off the beaten path and figure it out for yourself where to get there. And Wyatt Earp's brother was buried there, and he was killed in a shootout in what is now a wine tasting room, Flying Leap Cellars, I believe. We went wine tasting there, and you could stand where this guy got shot, and people were doing things and just walking over him. Apparently he was a little bit of a rebel or something. I've got to go back in the story. And so it was really neat. We're like, well, we're going to go find his grave. And we did, and these old graves. I mean, it has like boots on it and everything. So we're walking around, and we're seeing all these names and connecting. And now this is a really genealogical hotbed because all the ranching. And it's the rail. Okay, going to the rail. There's so much to cover, Miss Holly. This is going to be wild. This has got to do with an area where cattle ranching became prevalent because of the railroads and the railroad coming across. And don't even start me on the history of the railroad of southern Arizona. It's fascinating because this is how Yuma even came to be with even the Colorado River and the irrigation of that. But anyhow, getting back to it, we went out in the desert, playing around in this graveyard, looking at all the names and everything. And later they do connect to like town, the names on streets, and all of this started connecting. But there was a rattlesnake. I was going to say it's Rose Colette or something. I've got a rattlesnake hanging out on this grave, and I filmed it. It was a baby rattler. And so is this something that snakes seem to hang out in cemeteries? Is that like a thing just because of the rock, you know?
Well, I really believe out in the rural cemeteries, if they're quiet places, there's not a lot of foot traffic.
Yeah.
And I don't know. When I was at gym, I had tennis shoes on, and, we went to step out of the van we were going to show them, how to search a cemetery. And it felt like a sledgehammer hit me. And I looked down and there was I'd stepped out and it hit me. And I looked down and there was this biggest snake I've ever seen. And I jumped 17 feet over a headstone. I screamed. I thought it was a rattlesnake. And another gal that was in the second band, she jumped out and took pictures. And it was a bull snake, B-U-L-L, bull snake.
Oh, yeah, they're not bad.
And
yeah.
No, they're not even poisonous, but I don't care. It scared me.
I want to see the pictures of this.
I nearly died of fright, but it resembled to me a rattlesnake. And I've seen rattlesnakes here where I live, throughout my life. I just stay away from them.
Yeah.
They're as scared of you as you are of them. Unless you corner them, they don't bother you. But this snake must have just been there. I didn't see it as we pulled in, but it really scared me. And so I don't go to cemeteries anymore unless I have my leather boots on. It's not worth taking a chance. And there's spiders and chiggers and who knows what's out there. It's just really smart. I had good, heavy-soled kids on, but it struck me. And it didn't penetrate my shoe or into my skin, but it scared me.
Wow.
So I did an article on how to get dressed to go searching a cemetery.
Oh, this is we're going to do a Halloween show.
Yeah, I was just going to say, maybe you don't want to do it at night.
I know, this is so fascinating to me about, just how I didn't know we were going to talk about snakes and cemeteries today, this is where this kind of topic, genealogy, just goes in so many directions. And, it's like, wow, you could do, story of people floating in logs, floating in rivers and doing things. I'm going back to that lady, floating on a log to listen. There was also that time back in the day where, women would cut their hair to pretend that they were a man to get into the military. There were women who, historically have done that around the world, and they weren't being listened to a lot of times. So here you are, you're going to risk your life, go out there, and, luckily she was listened to, right? Instead of said, hey, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, back in the day, you got to think that that's the one thing, about history is we also have to remember that things were done differently back then to what it is now. You can have opinions, but
people want to judge history by today's standard, and it's not. You just can't. It was a different world. It's just like going to a foreign country. You really have to learn the language.
So one
it's a
of
different
your
world.
10 questions is, and we always like to do this, is, if you're going to sit down and have 3 people over for dinner, who would they be? And you said your grandma, because that's your start and she's an inspiration. And then you said, Nancy and I get to go.
Yay.
So this is, we want to meet you for dinner for sure. We want to know, number one, what are you cooking?
It's going to be Dutch oven for sure. We'll do Dutch oven.
Cool.
Maybe Mountain Dew chicken, or maybe we'll do lasagna. But it'll be Dutch oven and
Dutch oven?
Yeah, some baked apples, and they're really good.
Oh, wow. So you're into Dutch oven cooking. That is so cool. I know we've touched on this before. That's a lot of what, I was raised in South Africa, where, they'd make potjiekos.
Yeah.
And, when you start to go back to, I think when those kind of meals were put together and it was like a feast where people got together in the kitchens and holidays, that's when stories come out. And that's a good time for folks to capture those stories so that they can, hold on to their family history. That's where a lot of the, maybe not written records are out there, but that's where you're going to hear them, is over cooking food with grandma,
Right.
It would be cool to get grandmas all together.
Yeah, that would be neat. That would be neat. Well, if you come over here for dinner, Holly, you're getting chili or pizza.
I love chili. Sounds good. Sounds good.
Almost, it's a crock pot chili, so it's almost in the Dutch oven, but not quite. But that's what we're good at, and it's safer for everybody for us to stick to things like crock pots and people who know how to Dutch oven cook. That's where you get to go with that. But very excited for this journey of these amazing conversations we're going to have over the years of family history. I can see how it's going to just be different things, different times. But speaking of food, one last question. Do family recipes tie into genealogy at all? Like, do you see grandma's recipes in a recipe box, or sometimes there's family history cookbooks, that kind of thing?
Absolutely, absolutely. It goes much deeper than that. I love books, and so when my grandmother died, and my dad and their family split up all their stuff, there were a few books that nobody wanted, and I got them. And one was a original version of Uncle Todd's Cabin that had the spine was missing, and they didn't realize that it was a valuable thing. So I was really lucky to get that. But one was a cookbook. It was called the World Hotel in Chicago, and it was a cookbook, and it's full of all these recipes, and it had my great-grandfather's handwriting where he'd made notes, and in the back it had his genealogy. Whoa. Who would have thought you would write something like that in a cookbook? But it was there. And then as I've done research over the years, I have found dumplings. How do you make dumplings? Have you ever made dumplings in your family?
Mm-hmm.
Did
Yes.
someone in your family make dumplings? How do you make them?
With flour, water. We didn't put eggs.
Butter.
Butter. Yeah, we used
and
to.
then you put them on top of a stew.
In a crock pot.
In a crock pot.
Yeah. Did you roll them out and cut them into squares, or did you drop them by the spoonful? Or
no, we learned, actually. I remember in England, family sitting and they would do, not the crock pot, but I remember sitting with my step aunts, and they did these dumplings where it wasn't. I know what the type you're talking about, but they kind of did like a handful of dough and just threw them on top.
Yeah.
And just threw it on top, and they cooked. They almost like boiled in the sauce.
And the way you make a dumpling can tell you what country your ancestor came from.
Oh.
It's very fascinating. The way you cook carrots, the way you prepare food is handed down from mother to daughter generally, from one family generation to another.
And go on this.
Yeah, I mean, so you see, you buy recipe books that are for recipes of Holland, and they have their own little unique thing. But if you are schooled in that, you can, a chef, someone that has studied really well, can walk into a home and say, oh, that has an Italian flair to that. They can tell. And so people don't think about it, but the things that you eat can give you clues to your genealogy, your family history.
That's interesting.
Fascinating stuff.
Sanguinetti House in Yuma he was like he was the merchant of Arizona, Sanguinetti's, and he ended up. This is really odd. It was in Yuma, Arizona. He went there and he was like, "Here's your $1. Go do something when you're 17." And he went up to the gold rush and then went back down to Yuma. So he was the one who started ice trains or ice storehouses out in the Colorado River and all these things. But he became rich, and he got involved with the railroads and ranching and absolutely anything he could get his hands on. And by the way, we found his history in Sonora, California, and we had been to Yuma, because we've been covering that area for years. And we went up, and Sonora is right out, it's the gold country. And there's a street named Sanguinetti. And we're like, no, can't be the same, could it? Well, here we are. We're on the border of Sonora, Mexico. And so Sonora, California is named after the Mexican miners that, came up when everyone was coming up from, the Spanish and the Mexicans were coming up through that area. And of course, we were Mexico for many, many years. But there, it's Sonora, Mexico. California was named that. Here we go, California, back down to Yuma, Arizona, and here's this man street names named after him, and it turns out to be the same guy. It's crazy. But the whole thing, going back to what people eat and drink and do things, he was importing wines from Italy, and because his roots go to Italy. And it's so funny that all the wine bottles in his kitchen and things like that, because you can go in his old house now, and the things they've been able to save teaches everybody about the family before him, because he came on his own as a kid. He was like 17 or something, 15 or 17. And so everybody's starting to learn more about his family just through those kinds of things. But remember now, the Peaches, who own the Coronado Motor Hotel, their family, John Peach, his family comes from Czechoslovakia. Well, they drank wine too, but during Prohibition, his dad, he must have been friends with Sanguinetti, because they both loved their wine. They made their own wine, the Italians and the Czechoslovakians, and they were doing this around the country. They made their own wine, and they would bury it under the street or under the buildings so they couldn't get caught. Well, one day they were doing some kind of renovation at the hotel, or they had to go underground for the pipes or something. And John kept telling Yvonne, his wife, watch out, there's wine bottles down there. She's like, oh, Johnny, Lo and behold, I don't know if it was a flash flood, I don't know how it came up, but all these old bottles of wine popped up out of the street. And this just goes back to that was part of their daily diet, have that.
Well, during Prohibition, my grandmother, they made their own liquor, whatever. I don't know I don't even know what the recipe was.
If that was in Georgia, that was moonshine.
It was actually here in Utah.
Oh, wow.
My mother's family, and I'll probably get in trouble for telling the story, but it's too precious. So they, the cops were coming to check them out because they'd heard that, they were making, I don't know if it was whiskey. Anyway, they took and they dumped it it was corn mash, I think. Okay. So it probably was moonshine of some kind, but they took it out and they fed it to the pigs and the ducks and the geese. And my mother can remember, she tells the story and she just laughs of all of the animals were just drunk and wobbling around and how hysterical. And they just thought that was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. But they didn't get caught because there wasn't anything there to catch them. But they'd fed it to the pigs and the chickens and
that just proves the pigs will eat anything. Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. We're definitely going to have a good series with this. I want to remind everybody again, Miss Holly's event, it's Pirates of the Pedigree. The 2018 International Family History Expo is October 15th through 20th, 2018. She also has different events happening as well throughout the year. So online classes, and so go to family-history-expos.com and contact Holly if you need help individually or you want to plan some kind of retreat. I'm into that, Holly. I see that as we travel the country, we're going to be calling Miss Holly. You need to come do a retreat.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I'm all over that.
Yeah. So everyone, again, family-history-expos.com, and we were talking about those 10 questions. You'll be able to read those in the September-October issue of Big Blend Radio and TV magazine, but you can go see them now if you want. Go to blendradioandtv.com. And, of course, we want to thank everyone for joining us on the show today. Thank you, listeners. Big Blend Radio airs Sunday through Friday. If you go to bigblendradio.com, you'll see the schedule. You can listen as shows go live or anytime afterwards on demand. And, Holly, we like to play music, So
I love it. That's great.
Now, last time you were on the show, we were talking about Morenci, right? Debbie Girdler, she's connected there, and that's connected also your family. There's all these connections. And I talked about the artist Ted DeGrazia, and who's from Morenci, and he was, raised in a mining camp, and he turned out to be one of the most prolific Southwest artists in the world, and one of the most reproduced artists in the world. And his gallery is up here in Tucson, Arizona. But talk about family history. We got to get into that. There's some family history there. With Ted DeGrazia, we always do interviews about him, and it's amazing. More and more stories come out every time we chat with Lance, the executive director over there. And we're like, no way, he knew so and so. Like, even Paul McCartney from the Beatles tried to go get him to open the gallery, and he's like, no, it's closed. Back in the day. But anyway. he passed on and left all kinds of crazy things in his gallery. And he built the gallery out of adobe brick with the local Yaqui Indians. And it's amazing what this building, it's just an incredible place. It's a historic landmark. Anyway, so they go through and they found manuscripts of his music that he wrote.
Wow.
And so his son is a Renaissance man, just like Ted DeGrazia, is a flamenco guitarist. So he got together with the Tucson Orchestra, Jazz Orchestra, and the University Jazz Ensemble. I'm going to get that wrong, but and they recreated his music and recorded it, and included also some of Domingo's music. And now you can get on the album. It's called Please Remember Me. And I feel like that is like the perfect song for family history, right? Please remember me. So that's what we're going to play. So everyone, you can get that.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me here today, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Yes, everybody. It's always the third Friday here on Big Blend Radio at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. And here it is. Please remember me. And you can get the album at DeGrazia.com. Take care, everyone.
We'll meet